Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to Community Talk. I'm your host, Bhagwan Singh Virk. I'm joined in the studio by Manjit Singh Mangat, by Sabji, and who's a prominent lawyer and also the president of the Sikh Gurdwara here in Toronto. In addition, I'm joined with Jagmeet Singh, the member of Provincial Parliament, Bramley Gore Moulton. Now, these gentlemen share a commonality, and that's not just the profession of law, but they've had their visas recently rejected by the Indian consulate here in Toronto. So they wanted to travel to India, and both gentlemen have been rejected by the Indian state and have not been allowed to actually travel to India. So I'll start with you, Jagmeet Singh Ji. Why do you think the Indian government has rejected, or the Indian consulate here in Toronto has rejected to grant you a travel visa?
So I was personally quite surprised by that. Maybe aap bahut हैरान सी कि मैंने इनकार किया. So what they did is, what happened is I applied. I went recently in January, and I was there in Punjab for 1 month, from January approximately 14th to about February 14th for 1 month, no problem. I applied again this year, and I was denied a visa. I was not given a visa after about 4 months, and I went to the consulate to find out what the details were. I received an email confirming the fact that I was not allowed to travel to India, and I also had a meeting with the consulate. And in that meeting, the suggestion was openly and officially that there was no reason given for my denial. That it's an Indian government's decision, and the consulate said that it was the Home Ministry in India that flagged me and said that because of that I was not allowed to go. But in terms of our conversation, the suggestion that was hinted at me was that because of the work I did with human rights, because of the voice that I was raising or the criticism that I was leveling at the human rights track record of India, that was concerning to them. And that was all they could point to, because all of my statements, all of the things I've said are either recorded in Parliament or recorded on YouTube or in the media. And I challenged them to point to anything that I said that was in any way of a threat to India or a danger to India. All the things I've criticized were human rights, and these issues would actually only make a country better if they tackle the problems that they faced.
Like Sabji, you were rejected as well. Was there any particular reason given to yourself?
I think the reasons, as Jagmeet has told, they have not given me any reason. I have been a frequent visitor to India in the last 20 years since I came to Canada in 1988. I have been going to India 3 times in a year sometime. But reasons are not so simple to explain. One of the reasons is that Indian Consulate General is being misused by people by giving them misinformation about people and trying to stop visas. That has happened to many members of the Punjabi Press Club, because they participate in the events where we voice the voices of freedom and protest against the genocide in India. With me particularly, it was last year when Pritpal Singh, one of the Consulate General's employees, he came to Gurdwara at Sikh where we had already organized a protest. He happened to be there.
So can I get this sequence right? So you had organized a protest in the Gurdwara, and he'd come for...
Last year, November 2012. We had a whole month of November organized as a protest for Sikh genocide in India in all the Gurdwaras. And Sikh was also doing that. And he happened to be there
in a private function.
In a private function. And we took that opportunity to voice our Sikh sentiment that Indian government is responsible for the genocide in India, and the blame will not be taken off from the Indian government until they punish the culprits. So that is the only thing, not more, not less. And other than that, I have been participating in the Punjabi Press Club. I have been participating in all the events organized in the interests of justice against the people who have perpetrated crimes in India. So I participated in those. Really, in my heart, I was only trying to create some pressure so that rule of law is established in India, which will give some respect to Indian government and India in the international forums and everywhere. But I think instead of trying to graciously accept the criticism and improve their system, they try to suppress the voices of freedom, So that is the reason for denial of the visa.
Now, if I was someone from the Indian consulate or someone from the Indian political class watching yourselves, and I'd be saying, especially in your case, Manjit Singh, that Bhai Sahib, you left India in 1988. You chose to leave India. It's not as you were born and brought up in India, but you chose to leave India. You chose to live in Canada, right? Now, India has a free and democratic society. The Indian state would say is a free democratic society. There are many political parties. There are many human rights organizations. There are many left-wing organizations. Why do you, as someone who has decided to leave India, actually concern yourself with the issues that take place in India? Shouldn't you be concerning yourself more with the issues that take place in the land that you have adopted?
I think anybody can raise that question, but emotionally, no matter how far we go from India and wherever we live for our livelihood or for so many other reasons, our heart still lies in India. We have emotional ties in India. I have property in India. I have relatives in India. Most of the Sikh community, which is emotionally attached to me, lives in India. So the well-being of our Sikh community in India, or even the human beings in India, is our concern, and I think that is a valid concern. Nobody should have that question, why are you concerned about India? We are concerned about India.
Manjit, I come to you, Jagmeet Singh. I mean, your case is very different in terms of Manjit Singh's case, where he was born and brought up in India. You weren't born and brought up in
That's right.
Right? You're born and brought up in Canada.
That's right.
Should you not be more, why are you interfering? The Indian government saying, hey, Canadian boy, why are you interfering in our business?
I think that, in terms of which is more or less, I think you have a responsibility to care about your community where you live. Absolutely, no one would deny that. But we also realize that as individuals, as human beings, we are all citizens of this planet Earth. And things that happen around the Earth should concern us. We should be concerned about environmental disasters that happen around the Earth because this is our home. We live on this Earth. Similarly, we should also step out of our own communities and out of our own geographic areas and be concerned about the plight of humans around the world. So I've often talked about the fact that injustice against one is injustice against all. And the fact that if there is something going on in any part of the corner, any corner of the world where there's something inappropriate going on, people who are right-minded, who are concerned about the livelihood of others, who are concerned about rights and justice, should actually stand up and voice their concerns. So in that respect, I think we all have an obligation, not just it's a good thing to do, but I think we have an obligation, a duty, that if you're free, that you make sure that around the world there is freedom. If you have certain rights and privileges, that you make sure around the world people enjoy those as well. And for that reason, I think I personally have obviously a connection because of my family and because the constituents that I represent, they feel very connected to where they've come from. And as long as there is an injustice, their wounds are real. So whether they no longer live in Punjab or no longer live in Delhi or in India, since they've come here, wherever you come from in the world, you bring with you your strengths and your weaknesses. You bring with you your great experiences and the injuries that you've suffered. And many people are still hurting from the injustice. And until we find a solution to that, we can't reconcile those problems, those wounds. We can't move past them. We can't heal. We can't grow as a society until we rectify those wrongdoings.
Bhai Sabji, you've been denied by the Indian government your travel visa. What have you done?
I was denied in October. Since then, I have wrote many letters. I have wrote letter to the Consulate General's office explaining what had happened. I tried to ask the reasons from the Consulate General office why did they refuse me visa. I did not receive any reply. And after that, I wrote my letters to the Home Ministry in India, Prime Minister in India, President in India, and Foreign Affairs Ministry in India, and to the Office of Consulate General, that the real reason is that the Consulate General's office is being misused.
But who's it being misused by, in your opinion?
There are media groups in Toronto. There are two or three media groups. Punjabi Press Club is being voices of freedom more frequently, more openly, more strongly, and there are other media groups who put pressure on the Punjabi Press Club to suppress the members so that they start disassociating with the Punjabi Press Club. It has happened to Jaginder Singh Gareva, who is our senior member. It has happened to my brother in the past, Gurdish Mangat. It has happened to Soti Nagra. Those people have never indulged in any kind of criminal activity or any other illegal activity, just simply to pressure them so that they disassociate themselves from the Punjabi Press Club and don't participate in these protests and events for the justice.
And yourself, you're in a slightly different position as being a member of the provincial parliament. What have you done about your rejection?
So I began with letting the message be known in Punjab. One of the things that happened is that I was supposed to go to Punjab to receive an award, and I had to tell the organizer that I couldn't be there. It was going to be the Sikh of the Year award. It was also going to involve the Akal Takht Jathedar, other Jathedars from other Takhts, as well as head Granthi. So Panch Sikh Saiban were going to be there, and so I had to let the organizers know that I wasn't able to attend. So I let them know, and then once I let them know, the story leaked out in Punjab somewhat. So we sent out a press release as well as corresponded directly with journalists to let them know what happened. And so there's a release in Punjab. Then we did a wider release in India so people in India would know what's going on. And I also drew a connection that, in case anyone has any doubt, my family, my great-grandfather was Seva Singh Tikriwala, and he fought for the independence of India. He fought for the freedom in India. And my oldest Tayaji, Shivcharan Singh Taliwal, was a lieutenant in the Indian Army, and he died in the 1972 India-Pakistan War. So he died defending, the freedom of the country, and now his nephew and the great-grandson of Seva Singh Tikriwala is no longer allowed to go to a country just because I'm speaking out on human rights, which they died for a country they thought were protecting these ideals and principles. So we let that story be known, and then we released a story in the mainstream media here in Canada, South Asian media as well as Canadian media. We got some good coverage. Toronto Started an article, Ottawa Citizen put my op-ed, my editorial about what happened to me, and now we're going to grow the story, letting more people know about it. The next step is to now apply some political pressure. I've contacted some of my counterparts in the federal party to let them know about the situation, and we want more attention placed on this. Why is it that the Indian government, which is a government that has economic ties with Canada, is denying an elected official from Canada with absolutely no justified reason? What message does that send? And if it's happening with me, an elected official, someone in a position of some power, what is happening to the average citizen? How are they being mistreated by this visa denial? And how is this visa denial being used as a tool to silence people so they don't talk about issues of human rights?
Baisavji, in your practice as a lawyer, now the Canadian government itself rejects many visa applications from India, right? For those who want to travel here. Now there's no hue or cry, as it were, raised about that. Why is it? Do you have a comment on that?
Giving visa to anybody to somebody's country is every country's sovereign right. But at the same time, when they refuse visa for people coming to Canada, there are different reasons. They don't have people who are coming from India to Canada or from other countries to Canada. They don't have, Canada is not their motherland. Did not, like we came from India, we have Indian roots. Those people don't have. Secondly, because the economical differences, there are certain concerns that people might come and start staying here, so they have a policy in place. Those visas are denied according to that policy. But here I have been personally going to India in the last 25 years, maybe 40 times. This visa denial for a reason, to suppress the voices of justice, or for other reasons, that is totally unjust. So we can't compare the visa denial by Canada to other people with visa denial by India for the Indian going back to India.
The political pressure, India and Canada, they have $5 billion worth of trade. I've read some figures that there is an attempt to raise that to 15 billion in terms of trade. Don't you think that the Canadian state's interests are going to be that $15 billion worth of trade, rather than Jagmeet Singh's and Manjit Singh Mangar's and people like that, their visa applications?
We've seen something very similar when it comes to China, that when America was dealing with China, that the human rights track record of China was something that came up a lot. And rightly so, because if you have a country that you're dealing with and that country doesn't have a good track record, it looks badly upon your own country as well. It looks poorly upon you for your international reputation. So I think, in fact, it actually would work, it should work the other way, that Canada wants to build ties with India. And in this global economy, I think that's fine. I think every country should work on building relations with countries around the world. Why not? You should build relations so that everyone can advance, everyone can become successful. If you can grow economies, if you can grow opportunities so that everyone can benefit from it, that's a great idea. But you should also make sure that your trading partner is living up to a certain standard, certain international standards. And if we're planning to have a heightened relationship or a stronger relationship with India, then there's a heightened responsibility that that country that we're having a trade partnership with also lives up to certain international standards of human rights. And the message that India sends to Canada by denying an elected official without any reason is a very poor message, and I think will harm the relationships between the two countries. And I'm hoping that this is seen as a nonpartisan issue. This is the fact that they're denying a Canadian official simply for speaking out of human rights looks very poorly on the country, looks very poorly on India, and is an insult to Canada.
I'm actually going to take that partisan. One follow-up question was going to be about the partisanship. I mean, you're a member of the New Democratic Party, the
Yes.
NDP, in a provincial level. Do you think the Conservatives, the party in power, is actually interested in Jagmeet Singh, whether he can travel to India or not, and how much political pressure do you think the Conservative government is actually going to apply to India?
Well, on my behalf, I'm going to make sure it's known that I was denied and that I think it's an insult to Canada, to Canadians, to Canadian elected officials generally. Because if you deny someone entry without reasons and they're someone voted by the constituents of that riding, it's the same constituents in my riding that elected a Conservative MP federally. Those same constituents elected an NDP MPP provincially. So it's a disrespect to those same constituents. It's a disrespect to Canadians generally. So it isn't a partisan issue, and I'm hoping that that's not seen as that. And just as an issue in terms of the respect of Canada and the respect of Canadian elected officials, on that level alone, all parties should be united on this issue.
Sorry, do you run a paper or do you?
I used to run Punjab Guardian. I used to be the president of that paper. We ran it for 3.5 years. I'm still a member of the Punjabi Press Club. That's how I became the member of the Punjabi Press Club. Indian government, Canadian Consulate General of India is being used by these people even to extort money from the people.
So you're going to have to explain that to us, to our viewers, especially the ones in Europe, that they're not going to be able to understand.
Well, if somebody's visa is denied and one media person who is connected, he comes to people and he would say, okay, I will arrange your visa. And he gets the money from people, or even scares people that visa will be denied. Even in my case, one media person, after it became known to some people that my visa has been denied, he put up a call show on the air. He said the words, don't be in bad company, don't go to those places where you know you shouldn't be going, like directly putting pressure on me to withdraw from the press club. So there are so many ways I can. I happen to have. There was one application before the Indian Consulate General's office to extend somebody's visa for 10 years. They needed evidence from them that he is living here at some institution. And I happened to write a supporting letter for him. Just seeing my name, before they seen my name, he was allowed extension for 10 years. But when they see that my name, because I wrote the letter, the Consulate General's employee, they removed the 10 years and said only 1 year. Just because I have written that letter. So they go to that low level So it's not totally Indian government's fault. The people who are there, they are misusing the Indian government's authority as well.
Right. How do you see this playing out now in your case, Jagmeet?
So what I see is, what I'm hoping to see is that there is Canadian pressure applied on the Indian government to let them know that the denial of a Canadian elected official sends a very bad message to Canadians as well as elected officials, that it is something that would damage and harm the relationship that Canada is seeking to build with India. So I'm hoping for that political pressure. I'm also hoping to expose the injustice of this type of visa denial system. The fact that visas are being arbitrarily denied to people based on their human rights positions or their expression of criticism or outrage about the way people are treated. To me, that should be encouraged. We need to encourage people who are speaking up on issues, whether it's, I spoke very actively on the fact that the treatment of women in India is not just isolated rape cases. The treatment of women in India is partially a product of a state military and state police that uses violence against women as an intimidation tactic. That systemic use of violence against women by the state sends a message to the public that it's appropriate and okay to do so. And so I've criticized the state for that. If you look at India's track record in terms of the army incidents of rape against women across India, not in any particular area, but across India, from Manipur, Assam, Nagaland, to Punjab, to Kashmir, across India, that use of state violence is harming the fabric of society. It's perpetuating this violence against women. That's one issue. Women are a minority group, not in numbers, but in power, and they're being abused in India because of the state's, partially because of the state's responsibility in sending that message. The treatment of other tribal groups, the treatment of other minority groups, the treatment of religious groups, minorities like Christians and Muslims. There is a systemic abuse of minorities in India that's going on. And simply by speaking on these issues, nothing else, just saying, listen, you need to improve that. If you want to move ahead as a country, you can't move a country ahead by dividing people, by implementing that British system of divide and conquer, divide and rule. That's not going to work. That's not how you build a strong nation. That's not a nation-building tactic. By criticizing a country for that, and that results in a denial, I want to showcase how this is something that's happening to an elected official. Imagine what's happening to the average citizen. Imagine what type of threats, what type of pressure is being placed on average citizens, and how their voices are being silenced because they're afraid of losing their visas. And if that's something that I can expose and showcase, I'm hoping that India will realize that this is not the symbols or the signs of a democracy. That's not how a democracy runs itself. Those are not the things that a democracy does. And I'm hoping that down the road, that by exposing these injustices, this improper use of power, that it'll result in some sort of justice for the people.
Sabji, just picking up on Jagmeet Singh's point, we talk a lot about India and some of the injustices in India, but now that we live in Canada or the UK, Europe, or wherever, our gurdwaras, and you're president of a gurdwara as well, they don't seem to have a discussion about, say, corporate greed or corporate wealth. They don't have a discussion about, especially in terms of Canada, about the First Nations. Yet they're always, every gurdwara always seems to have some sort of program about 1984. Do you think there's a failing on part of our community to talk about the sort of injustices that take place in the country that we either have adopted or are born to?
First of all, it is very important for us to talk about India. My generation personally, because if you understand properly, we have property in India. Indian government, they don't only deny visa. They refuse to give you consular services. They won't emboss my power of attorney. Like, I can't sell my property. I can't do anything in India. So my property can be taken away by anybody because they don't give me consular services. So that is very important for the people in my generation who have their property relatives in India. That's why I think. And people of my generation, especially who are first generation from India, they are in the Gurdwara managements. So we are more hung up with those issues. And I acknowledge that we should be talking more about the Canadian issues. They should be part of our agenda as well. And I blame it on your generation because you don't participate in the Gurdwaras, and that's why maybe we are more focused on our Indian issues.
Support points. Jagmeet Singh.
Yeah, so instead of, I'm not really looking, I don't think blame is really useful. I think that acknowledging the problem and then looking for a solution. So a bit more of a proactive solution would be that let's encourage, we believe in social justice. That's a Sikh principle. We believe in Vanike Shakana. That's a Sikh principle. The idea of sharing with those who are less fortunate. These are Sikh principles. So we have the principles. We have a social justice history. That's what we've stood for. We've stood for uplifting the downtrodden. That's something that we believe in. Now I think what we can do is we can work together, intergeneration. We can work together to create platforms so that we do talk about these issues. Because it's important to say that as Sikhs, for good public relations in our communities that we live in Peel region, in Brampton, Mississauga, and in Toronto, for good public relations so that people know what we're about. They know, hey, listen, as a Sikh, Sikhs stand up for justice. That means they're going to stand up for the fact that if insurance companies are charging too much for the auto insurance, Sikhs stand up against that because we believe in a justice principle, right? Framing it as a Sikh thing to do. If Aboriginals are being mistreated, we stand up as Sikhs and say the mistreatment of any minority group is wrong. And that's something that a Sikh would do, that's because it's our principle, would be a great public relations message. It would also be great for the Aboriginal communities, and it would be great for the youth to let them know, not only do we talk about Sikh issues, but we also talk about issues that impact the rest of Canadian society. I think it's a great idea, and I think we should definitely open up our platforms for that.
To add, I think you might have noticed because you go to Sikh Lahar. Sikh Lahar is a brand new Gurdwara. And Sikh Lahar encourages all the activities that are good for the society, and you have been a part of that. So I encourage you to bring all those things that you feel are good for the society, come there, and it's open.
On that note, this is all we have time for this week. I'd like to thank our guests, Jagmeet Singh, MVP, and Manjit Singh Mangat, lawyer.
Thank you very much.
Waheguru Ji Ka
Khalsa,
Khalsa,
Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.